Hello. So in today's session, I am going to share with you some of the ways in which I start to get myself back into a routine with painting and back in the studio. As you can see, I've got my painting togs on, so I'm all ready. But what I thought it would be helpful is to share with you just some of my top tips for getting back into the rhythm of things and back into routine, because it can be quite tricky. It can be one of those things where we kind of come into the studio and then, get a little bit stuck with what we do and how we do it, and a little bit thinky. So hopefully some of these tips will help you just to bit more smoothly transition back into painting. So the first thing I do is, not surprisingly, is to make sure that the workspace is sorted out and tidy and you've not got everything everywhere from previous sessions, and things are, sort of in some sort of order, because with all the will in the world, if you're starting back again after a break, you kind of need some kind of psychological fresh start, I suppose. And the having your desk clear and things ready to be used and set up is the first step of that, really. And as you can see, I've got my paints here and the colour palettes and so on. And then on the shelf I've got some of the studies, and in a minute I'll whiz round to the other shelf. I've got the other side of the room, which has got my other concertina sketchbook on it. Because you do need to have your studies around you, and you obviously need space for the new work. But I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I'm just putting the camera over so you can see that side space, but I'm going to talk about that separately. So in any event, having it sort of ready for action is key, really. And this year I learn the error of my ways. I can't really survive without having towels. These are old towels from friends. I just cut them up and use those in addition to having the kitchen paper. Anyway, so that is my number one. Make sure your space is organised. And related to that, actually, number two is really to check that you've got enough of things. So in my case, the other day, or last night actually, I started to order more paints and things I thought I might run out of, like some gloss medium and so on. And that way, even if you get started, you're going to be able to carry on, because your additional resources will come. And I do this, by the way, in this bucket because I like to kind of keep reselecting my tools, so I make sure I keep things fresh and I have a variety of tools and I don't get stuck with just one brush that I use all the time. So I have this as my sort of, I gather it from over there, I've got all my pots, and I gather some tools together, and then I keep sort of changing and modifying it as I go, really. And as you can see there, I bought some more DIY brushes. My third top tip is to put all of this started work together so that you can have a little bit of a review. And I think this is really important when you're starting fresh again, because you need to know where you're at with the work and what your thoughts are on the work. And so what you see here are these chunky panels that I've started over time, and some of them were done with the original palette. So the top, that one and that one and that one and the big one were all done with the original palette, and these ones down the side. And then these four and this one were the palette that I started to look at recently. And there's only a couple of colours changed, but that gives me much more of a sort of a brownie palette in a way, and one which I think is a little bit more wintry. But anyway, that's a whole other story. And I've also put the surfaces, as you can see, that are blank, that I haven't yet started. And in the front there are some collage papers. And so what I do at this stage is I ask myself three questions, having gathered all of the work. The first question is, what do I like about it? The second question is, not surprisingly, what do I not like about it? And the third question is, what are my next steps? What am I going to do now? And it gives me a sort of a start point, really. So the things that I like about this particular work is I like the energy and rawness of it, and I don't want to to get rid of that as I progress on. That's always the challenge, I think, is to keep the energy and rawness in the work. So that's what I like. What I don't like is that at the moment it's a bit messy. I haven't obviously worked out the compositions or got the darks and lights all tickety-boo, but I think that's inevitable when you've only just put one layer of paint on. So that's you know, something to sort of bear in mind. And the other thing I didn't quite like was what I've already addressed, which is that the colour palette didn't tell the whole story. So the third question, what next? I mean, what is next is that I want to start these other three panels that I've got. And what I'm going to try is different ways of starting. So I might, you see the collage there, what I might do is start a couple of them with collage. And the bigger one, I might start with just drawing first, and draw over it, and then start adding paint. So just sort of to change things up a bit. So anyway, so that is my number 3, review the work that is started. And number 4 is all about creating small studies. Here you see me with the new colour palette, and I'm creating these small 4-inch square studies using the paint and using other mixed media and trying to use a variety of tools. And the advantage of this is that it starts getting you back into thinking about the marks and practicing the marks and shapes and patterns and lines that you like to use that are reflective of your subject matter. And so this is really about getting your eye in. And so I do multiple ones of these. Nothing is going to happen to them necessarily. They're probably just going to stay in this notebook. I mean, sometimes I do them on paper, but having the book helps. And here you see a double-page spread of them. And the other thing that I do as well for this series is I work in these concertina sketchbooks, and this is the pocket concertina sketchbook, and I've already got a background of some collage and some inks, and I'm working over it, looking at my work on the wall as a way of stimulating my interest in the subject matter, really, and just sort of getting back into it visually, which is what these studies help to do, really. And they're great as warm-ups as well, but what I'm doing is using them to get back into the work. And number 5 is all about journaling, not surprisingly. And what I found really helpful is using writing in my notebook, in my series journal, or whatever, about the subject matter. And what I'm doing here now is I'm actually just looking at all of the drawings on the wall and the other studies around me. And I'm just writing anything and everything that comes into my head as almost a way of data dumping, but also as a really useful way of reconnecting back into the subject. And I find that really helpful. So that's what I'm doing here now. And it just gives me that narrative again, and reminds me and forces me as well to be really clear about what it is in particular that I am interested in and therefore want to reflect in my paintings. Okay, so that was the notebook that I was writing in that you saw me working on and looking at the wall. And what I've started to do is to underline and sort of circle key phrases and words that have some resonance with me that I'm interested in exploring further, and I may then use them to create some small studies, more of the studies that I shared with you with the paint. And I've been then with my series journal, which is this one, I've started again to look through the statements I had about why I'm interested in the ramshackles, again with the view to singling some of them out and focusing on some of them in future work, and also to refresh my memory and to gather further understanding. And just really for completeness, or to kind of mention really, I'm quite interested in these short Japanese poems, a haiku, and potentially maybe creating some for the ramshackles that I will then use as collage in my work. But that's all for another day really, but I just thought I would mention that now as I'm looking through and journaling, and that's, you know, come to my attention again. Anyway, so I hope those 5 tips were helpful. I'd love as ever to hear your comments, and I'll catch you next time. So thanks a lot. Bye-bye.